Yo, Jiggy here, and as you can see, we are on F1 25, and I've really been looking forward to this game. I think I can say on behalf of most people, when you've been playing the previous F1 game for a while, coming towards the end of its life cycle, even though the games haven't really changed that much, and they haven't for a few years now, and even with this game, things feel very much the same, but there are some very subtle differences. It's always good to play something new, and I thought to start off my first video on F1 25, I think a video that's actually very, very important, no matter what equipment you have, your experience, your ability. I would really encourage you to spend quite a bit of time putting in the settings that suit you the most, because if you don't put in the settings that you feel most comfortable with, and also some things I would recommend you to get to more of your potential, you're not going to be able to execute what you actually can do. You're not going to be able to perform at your absolute best. And again, as a disclaimer, it does depend on the wheel, it does depend on some of your preferences, but I think as long as you're within certain parameters, which I'll be recommending throughout this video, I think you're giving yourself your best chance to maximise the fundamentals and to maximise your potential. So I think the first things first is choosing the camera view. This is what I see when I'm driving, so in the time trial, also when I go into the race, I'll be showing you all my settings for the camera, the wheel settings, calibration, because I think those things are absolutely crucial. Again, I'm on the PlayStation. If you're on PC, there's going to be a million more settings to change, so I recommend you to watch maybe one of the esport drivers. You can see some of their settings, because there's a lot of different graphics and things that they need to change. But if you're on Xbox and PlayStation, it's a lot more plug in and play. But I think without further ado, let's get into it. So I think if we go straight into the camera first, if you haven't guessed, I'm using the TV pod offset. I would always recommend, and I know there's a lot of people say, oh, why do you use this camera view? For me, I want to be as competitive as I possibly can. If I want a most immersive experience, then yes, I would use the cockpit view, but I'm here to be as competitive as possible. If you watch F1 Esports, I don't think there is anyone now who uses a cockpit cam. There were people in the past like Lucas Blakely, Bono House, they did, and not that you can't be fast with a cockpit, but you're going to really be limiting yourself because there's a lot more blind corners, wheel-to-wheel combat, stuff like that. So it's not so much the raw pace, it's just your ability to actually see things, which is very important. So I would personally recommend the TV pod offset, where you're above the car. I like the TV pod offset because you can have a bit more of a zoomed in feel. I've got a curved screen, so it kind of wraps around my screen. This is the reason why I have this. And these are all my settings here. You can play around with these as much as possible. What I would say is you want to probably put the camera shake definitely on 0, because you don't want, if you're looking to be as competitive as possible, you don't want that distraction. So I would recommend definitely putting that on 0. Everything else really is your preference, but I would say definitely TV pod offset or TV pod. Again, you can go in cockpit like this, and yes, you could be very, very fast. There's no denying you can be very fast, but I think if you want to be as competitive as possible, TV pod offset is kind of non-negotiable, I would say. If we go to the on-screen display, this is something that's very important as well. So before we go into the OSD, I know a lot of people moan at me for having miles per hour, kilometers per hour. Again, completely your preference. Degrees Celsius, I would recommend. I would also recommend the full track map, especially if you're trying to be competitive, even if you're doing career mode. I think it's very important to see what's going on around the track. For league racing, when people pit, you get an idea. So once you know the pit delta and they pass a certain corner, you know if you're going to be within that pit delta or not. I think just having the full track map is more useful or not. Delta time, I know a lot of people do turn this off as a distraction. I think Frederick Rasmussen turned it off in esports. For me, I like to have a delta time. Sometimes it can be a hindrance because when it's in the red, people will over push to get in the green. But for me, it's something I like to have, a little bit of a aim towards. Proximity arrows, I think that's very important as well. Driver tags, don't necessarily need it, but in league racing, if you're racing against the same people, some people who are more aggressive than others, I think it's just sometimes useful to have. Start lights, I would definitely recommend having on. Virtual rear mirror, again, I think that is preference, but I think it can be very useful as well. I'm someone who doesn't mind looking behind whilst I'm driving. For me, if I had this on, I think it would be more of a distraction than an assist itself. So that is completely up to you. If you don't like looking behind that much and you always like to see what's behind you, then by all means have that on, and have it on at the very top of your screen. Permanent session timer in the qualifying and the practice sessions, I think that's very important. So if you're doing qualifying, like short qualifying, full qualifying, whether that's career mode or league racing, just so you know how much time is actually left, I think is a very, very good thing to have. And yeah, objective panel, I don't really need to have it on because I don't do career mode. But if you go back into this, if you go into OSD customization, this is what allows you to change everything on your screen. But something that is very, very important is you need to be able to switch between the race and like time trial as well. So if you see on the bottom left hand side where it says layout, you have to change this depending on the race. So we're in race now, then it's qualifying, then it's practice, then it's time trial. So if you don't make all these changes for each one, then when you go to like qualifying, you could have, so you can see at the bottom of my screen here, the gear dials at the bottom. But then when I go into the race, that's how I have it. Then we go into qualifying, I actually need to change it for qualifying as well. But then when we go back into time trial, it's back where I want it to be, same with the deltas and everything. So again, this is personal preference. I like to have my gear dials, so if we go to it here now, I like to have my gear dials just on the halo itself. If it was too low, it'd be covering the steering wheel. And I actually quite like to see what's going on with the steering wheel as I'm driving, so it really mirrors what I'm doing in the cockpit. So I probably recommend to have this on top of the halo. I know some people have it to the side or at the very, very top of the screen, but I think you want it close to the wheel without it actually being over the wheel as well. So close enough where you can see it, but it's enough of a separation between them, and we don't have to actually look too far if it's on like the opposite end of the screen. I also have my full track map right up here as well. I think that's something to have where I can just glance up, because you don't need to look at that all the time. It's only if a safety car comes out or when you're pitting and things like that as well. So it's not too much of a distraction. It's easy to see. And I like to make these things here on the left hand, right hand side. So the driver names and the delta on the right hand side as far in the corners as possible of the screen, and just reducing the size by like 10-20%. So you can see that's on 63%. Look at the right hand side, it's still the normal side. So if we go over to there, believe yeah, that's still on 100%. So I like to really tuck them in the corners just so I have enough space on my screen. So as I'm driving, I want as much space as I possibly can. And then when we go over to here, this is where you bring up the menu. I like to have this quite big, covering most of my mirror, because this is something I have open all the time to change my ERS modes, to change my brake bias, things like that as well. So those are kind of like non-negotiables in the way I like to set up my screen. Having the gear dial right in the halo itself doesn't distract me. I can still see the wheel. Having the menus on the left, the top left and the top right as far into the corners as possible, which allows me to have as much real estate in terms of seeing the track as much as possible. Nothing that's blocking apexes, anything like that at all. That's the way I like to do it. But again, please remember, you can see the layout, whichever button you have on your controller wheel, you have to switch between these and make the same changes per one. Otherwise, it won't actually do anything at all. So if we discard the changes, so yeah, you can see all these here again. And I think now going into controls, vibration, force feedback, head over to your wheel profile, whichever it is. And first of all, calibration. Again, this is going to be very much determined based on the wheel you have. I have the Fanatec CSL DD, the Gran Turismo Pro wheel, 8 Newton meters of torque. Then I have the Fanatec free pedals. If you have like a Thrustmaster, Logitech, or then if you have something like a SimuCube, if you're on PC, all those other things, this can change quite a bit. But for me personally, most of the time, so steering rate always 100%, you don't want to be touching anything of these at all, because I'd rather change the rotation of the wheel instead of doing that. So I'd always recommend leaving this on 0. But one thing I always would recommend, especially if you have a load cell pedal, if you don't have a load cell pedal, you might not need to add any dead zone to the throttle or brake at all. But for me, I always like to have at least 6 dead zone. This is exactly the same settings I had on the last game, and you can see some clips of me driving here. This is how it looks as I'm driving. You can see I'm not leaning on my pedals too much as I'm going through the corner. So you want enough where you're trail braking, going from that high pressure down to low pressure, but you don't want it where, because I tend to lean my foot on the brake pedal on the straights and through the corners, you want it to be where you can push it a little bit, but it's not going to activate it straight away, because people then tend to power brake when they're using the brake and the throttle at the same time. So do just enough where you can lean in it, it's not going to activate, but you don't want to do it too much from when you're actually turning in, going from that high pressure, the more you turn in, the more you release, to then it just comes off completely, because then all of a sudden you then overspeed. So just do enough where you lean in it fractionally, by default it's not going to activate it. And with the throttle dead zone, I think it's quite easy. I kind of did the same thing as well, where I lean on the throttle a little bit during the corners, and sometimes if you do it too much, you're going to get too much wheel spin. It's going to cause you to lose control of the car. So I think just having a little bit of throttle dead zone is not a bad thing at all. And again, the vibration and force feedback, a lot of this does depend on your wheel and the way you like to drive as well. Me personally, the way I see force feedback is I don't want it to be where it's fighting around in my hands. On the straights, I'm kind of really struggling to keep control of the car when it's bouncing around, everything like that. I want it to be enough where I could drive with one hand, but it'd be pretty difficult. So for me, I don't want too much and I don't want too little. So when I'm driving through the corners, I can really feel the weight of the wheel. But then when I'm on the straights and I'm not doing anything, I can still feel some of the bumps, but it's not out of control. And then when I'm driving through the corners, I'm not really having to wrestle the car that much. So the more I turn, the heavier it is, but it's not too much. So on this game, I found that I did have to increase the force feedback a little bit. So last game I had it on that 72, so I've increased it by 22 or just around 20. Same for this as well. Just had to increase it a little bit. I think I left this the same. Off-track effects, I don't think you need to put particularly high, because you don't really want to be going off-track that much. Pit stop effects, I haven't changed this at all. And wheel dampener, just the strength of the wheel as you're going through the corners. I think I had to add maybe 2 clicks from this. But I think quite an important thing here is your wheel rotation. So I would always recommend to start off with 360, especially if you're quite new to the game or first 1 or 2 years into the game, because that's going to mirror exactly what you do. It's going to be mirrored in the game. I think that's very important, especially when you're learning the fundamentals. But if you're a little bit more experienced, and especially if you're quite a smooth driver, I think you can afford to lower this. So I wouldn't go below 330 for now. If you're going on really tight tracks like a Baku or Monaco, you could go 330 and below. Basically, the lower you go on this rotation, the less you have to actually turn yourself, and the more it's going to turn in the game. So it will feel a lot more responsive, even though you're not changing anything in the setup. But I think 340 for me is enough where if you're very smooth, it's going to turn quite a bit in the game quite nicely. Whereas if you have this on 360 and you're quite experienced, you feel like you're having to do a lot more work. It's probably going to feel a lot more understeering and stuff as well. So I would recommend probably 340 to 350 is quite a good bet. Also, again, remember that the wheel settings on your actual wheel on my Fanatec, I'll probably put it up on the screen here now, but you've got to make sure you change those as well. So there's in-game settings, there's in-wheel settings as well. But again, this does depend on your wheel. This does depend on your driving style. For me, I like a car that has good force feedback. I can feel the bumps, I can feel the vibrations, but it's not out of control, and I'm not feeling like I'm doing a workout every time. So I don't want too little, but I don't feel anything at all. It feels like I'm just moving through air. But I want enough where I can feel some resistance. The more I turn in, the more resistance I have, but it's not like fighting around in my hands. So that's the way I like to approach that. And I think, especially if we're on console, the only really other settings I would consider, so you've got graphic settings here, keep the gamma on 100, motion blur on 20, that's fine. Steering animation, if you turn it off, you're not going to see a steering wheel move. So I'd recommend having that on, definitely for sure. If you are a streamer or record or you do YouTube, I would turn the music off, because you will be getting a copyright and when you do record and stuff as well. So that's something I definitely do recommend. I have it on broadcast on the onboard mix, so you could do cinematic, broadcast, or driver. I think broadcast just gives me the best, and something I've done all the time. Again, these settings depend on your headset for that, but broadcast and everything else, and you don't really need to change. You could change David Croft.
Welcome to the commentary box. I'm Alex Jakes. Delighted to
Actually,
say
I think I
that
will
we're joined
change to
today
Alex
by
Jakes.
Anthony
So I'll keep it on
Davidson.
there. Actually, let's go back up. Yeah, otherwise you keep on talking. But yeah, other than that, I don't think you really need to change that much. So keeping this on exactly the same. And yeah, it's really just the camera customization, on-screen display, control vibration, force feedback. I'm running completely no assist. Simulation, that's there by default. If you're in time trial, I would probably recommend turning all these off for now, because if you have this on, I think, or whichever setting it is, you'll have a blue line. I see so many people in time trial for the whole life cycle of the game. They have that little blue line on. I would turn these all off just so you get rid of that, so you don't have any of that at all. And again, if we're just going back onto the screen here, this is exactly what I see. And this is, you can see how much real estate, how much of the track I can actually see, because everything's in the corner. I can see all the apex really clearly, and with this view, I believe that is going to make you as competitive as possible. So that is my recommendations. Those are my settings for F125. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Also, if you click the join button, become a YouTube member, you'll get access to all my league racing setups, all my online setups. You'll get discount on one-to-one coaching with me at www.coachdimas.com, and you'll be able to ask me any questions, direct message me personally. So anything you have, please consider joining that as well, because I'll be updating the setups on a very regular basis. And yeah, I hope this has helped you, and I'll catch you very soon. Peace.